In 1893, a 12-year-old boy from Germany lost his parents and became an orphan. Hans Wilsdorf inherited a small sum of money, but it was later stolen while he was traveling. Despite losing everything, he held on to one thing: his unstoppable passion for watches. This passion would eventually lead him to establish one of the world's greatest watch companies, Rolex. Following his parents' passing, Hans was sent to a boarding school after his relatives sold off his parents' business. There, he befriended a Swiss boy who introduced him to Switzerland's renowned watchmaking industry. Fascinated, Hans realized his true calling lay in this field. At the age of 19, in 1900, he moved to Switzerland and secured a job at Kuhne, a watchmaking company, where he was responsible for checking the accuracy of hundreds of watches daily. This experience fueled his passion for precision timepiece. In 1903, Hans relocated to London with the aim of expanding his career. However, during the journey, he suffered a major setback when the 3,300 German gold marks he had inherited were stolen. Left with no other choice but to move forward, he took a job at a watchmaking company's sales and marketing department. Over the next 2 years, he gained deep insights into manufacturing, sales, and consumer behavior. He observed that while most companies focused on making decorative watches, customers preferred simplicity, accuracy, durability, and elegance. Determined to fill this gap, 24-year-old Hans decided to start his own watchmaking business. Lacking sufficient capital, he partnered with his brother-in-law, who provided the necessary investment. This led to the establishment of Wilsdorf and Davis in 1905. Understanding the needs of travelers, Hans and his partner focused on manufacturing pocket watches that were smaller, more portable, and fitted with high-quality leather pouches for durability. Their first product, the Portfolio pocket watch, was an instant success. However, Hans had a vision beyond pocket watches. He believed wristwatches would eventually replace them. The challenge was that wristwatches were considered fashionable only for women. To break this stereotype, in 1906, Hans observed that both men and women in Britain enjoyed wearing bracelets. Seizing the opportunity, he introduced gold and silver wristwatches that resembled bracelets rather than traditional wristwatches. Branded as bracelet watches, these timepieces quickly gained popularity across Britain. Hans also wanted his watches to have a unique identity. Unlike other brands that used manufacturers' names, he sought a short, easy-to-pronounce name that could fit neatly on a watch dial. After considering over 100 names, he finally settled on Rolex and trademarked it in 1908. Rolex watches gained recognition, but accuracy issues persisted. At the time, achieving precision in wristwatch movements was a challenge. Until 1910, Hans imported movements from Switzerland, but he eventually decided to develop his own. After years of studying horology and collaborating with expert watchmakers, he created the 15-line caliber 200 movement, which became the world's first wristwatch movement to receive a chronometer certification. This achievement solidified Rolex's reputation, and by 1914, the company had expanded across Europe with a team of 60 skilled professionals. However, World War I disrupted Rolex's growth. The British government imposed a 33% export duty on watches, making Rolex significantly more expensive than its competitors. To survive, Hans relocated the company to Switzerland and renamed it Rolex Watch Co. Limited. The war had crashed the luxury watch market, but Hans noticed that soldiers increasingly relied on wristwatches for better timekeeping on the battlefield. Recognizing this demand, Rolex introduced trench watches, durable timepieces with unbreakable glass, a strong casing, and luminescent radium hands for visibility in low light. These watches kept Rolex afloat during the war and helped popularize wristwatches among the masses. Despite Rolex's growing success, wristwatches still faced challenges with dust and water resistance. Hans sought a solution by redesigning the watch case using a screw-on mechanism, which tightly sealed the components with rubber rings to prevent dust and water infiltration. This innovation led to the launch of the Rolex Oyster in 1926, the world's first waterproof wristwatch. For marketing, Hans partnered with swimmer Mercedes Glass, who wore the Rolex Oyster while attempting to swim across the English Channel. Although she didn't complete the swim, the watch remained fully functional, proving its waterproof capabilities. Rolex capitalized on this success with creative advertising, including displaying the watches in fish tanks inside retail stores. Hans continued innovating, aiming to develop a self-winding watch. At the time, watches required manual winding every 2 days, and improper sealing after winding could let water seep in. After years of research, Rolex introduced the Perpetual, rotorless semicircular mechanism that rotated with wrist movement, automatically tightening the mainspring. This led to the creation of the Rolex Oyster Perpetual, the world's first successful automatic watch, further cementing Rolex's legacy. However, Rolex faced another major challenge during World War II. The war disrupted global supply chains, impacting sales. Tragedy struck again in 1944 when Hans lost his wife. Despite these hardships, he remained resilient and focused on creating world-class timepieces. In 1945, to mark Rolex's 40th anniversary, he launched the Rolex Date, first automatic watch to display the date. A minor issue arose when customers found the date display too small, but Hans resolved it by adding a 2.5x magnifying glass, a feature still present in modern Rolex watches. By 1960, Rolex had introduced more revolutionary timepieces, including the Rolex Explorer, designed for mountaineers, the GMT Master, featuring a rotating bezel for tracking multiple time zones, and the Deep Sea Special, engineered to withstand extreme underwater pressure. Rolex tested the Deep Sea Special by submerging it nearly 11,000 meters, where it functioned flawlessly. These innovations solidified Rolex as the premier watch brand, capable of performing in the harshest conditions from the peak of Mount Everest to the depths of the ocean. Hans Wilsdorf achieved what no other watchmaker could have imagined. In 1960, at the age of 79, he passed away, but he left behind a legacy that made him immortal. Rolex had not only redefined the watch industry, but had also become a symbol of precision, durability, and excellence.